Hi, welcome to this video. In this video we're going to cover pools and volumes. So hopefully you've already watched the video where we talk about clients, storage manager, standalone drives. Now we're at pools and volumes. And pools and volumes apply both to the backup and the archive products. So stuff that you're going to discover in this video is applicable on both of those modules. So let's have a little discussion about what pools are. A pool is basically a container and it contains volumes, and then you target jobs at pools and then the pool contains the volumes. So remember that a volume is either a physical tape cartridge like an LTO cartridge, or if you're using disk storage, it could be a file on a disk. So what's a pool? Let's say we have a pool that we call backup, and the pool is basically a container. So you can have different pools. You could have an archive pool over here, and you could have a backup pool for full backups and a backup pool for incremental backups, and you can divide things up as you wish. And once you've created your pool, you label and therefore create volumes within the pool. So a pool can have any number of volumes in it, and the more volumes in a pool, the more capacity that pool provides. So for example, if these were LTO 6 cartridges which store 2.5 terabytes each, then we would have 7.5 terabytes of capacity in our pool. And then if we added another tape, then we'd have 10 terabytes and so on. And then what we do is we write a backup plan over here, which is our backup configuration, which we'll cover in the backup video. And the backup plan will say backup this data at this time on these days of the week and back it up to a given pool, so like the backup pool, and likewise for an archive plan. So a backup runs, targets a pool, and then within that pool there will be volumes, hopefully, otherwise it's not going to work. And the job runs, starts writing to the first volume, fills that one up, writes to the next volume, and then it's done. And then the next time it runs, it continues writing to that pool. There are also there's also the concept of recycling volumes within pools, which we'll come back to. Okay. So that's the general concept behind pools. Let's take a look at how this looks within the web admin interface. Okay, so back into the web interface here. This is the P5.1 install that we've already been looking at. So to create a pool, within the Pools section, click on New down at the bottom, and this brings up the pool properties. So we're going to create a few different pools as we explore the product. The first one we're going to create is going to be called Backup Disk. So this is going to be a pool for backing up, and it's going to be disk rather than tape. So the usage section is important. At the top we have to choose whether this pool is going to be used for backup, archive, or whether we're going to create LTFS tapes in this pool. We'll look at LTFS tapes in another section. So this is clearly going to be a backup pool, but rather than being tape, this is going to be a disk backup. Now, there are various other options attached to the pool, but we don't need to worry about those for now. We'll come back to those. So there we go. I've hit apply. We've created our pool. Close the properties window, and you see now the name of the pool. And currently there is 0 bytes available within this pool because there are no volumes. So although we've created a pool, we still have no volumes available. So let's create one other pool for archive, and then we can see how we label volumes into both of those pools. So this is going to be archive disk, and it's going to be an archive to disk pool. Apply, close. So now we've got two pools, one for backup, one for archive, both disk based, meaning that they can use the storage disk library 1, which is located on the desktop here, and but currently neither of these pools has any volumes in them. So the next step, in order to actually create the volumes and create files, the container files within this disk library folder, is to perform a labeling job. So to do labeling, labeling in the case of disk creates files within the folder, and in the case of tape, it will physically write a label onto a physical tape in the drive or in a tape library, and thereby identify a given physical tape as being a particular volume within Archiware. So in order to do labeling, you have to choose the device where you want to do the labeling. So in our case, this is going to be the storage manager, and we highlight the storage manager and we click label. And now we get a view of our disk library, which you'll remember from the earlier video has 10 slots available in it, which means we can have up to 10 files in the disk library. And we simply choose the slots that we want to label. So let's say we want to do slots 1 to 4, so I just held down shift and clicked on slot 4 to select everything from the first selection to the thing I clicked on, and we're going to choose backup disk as the pool. There is a little safety mechanism here whereby if we're doing a labeling job, because labeling is potentially destructive, we could be labeling a slot which contains either a volume file or a tape which already has data on it, then we might want to at this stage always skip if the volume does already contain data, and therefore if the volume is already labelled. So if we want to overwrite an existing volume, you have to click this box here and therefore be deliberate about erasing that data. In our case, there are no volumes currently, so we can just go with the default. You can also schedule this job to run later. So I click the label button, and because this is a potentially destructive job, we confirm that that is what we want to do. And we see the message telling us that a job has been scheduled, and we can use the job monitor to monitor that job running. And the button that we use to kick off the job becomes the monitor button. And we visit the job monitor and we see the labeling job, which would have been running at the top very briefly, has completed. If we double click on it, we get to see that a new disk file was created and a volume called disk backup number 1 was also created. So we now have 4 volumes created, and the net result of this will be that the volume list will now for the first time show us our 4 volumes and various statistics about those volumes, and those volumes relate to these 4 files in our folder on the desktop, which are currently just 91K in size, so they don't yet have any real data inside of them. If we go back to our pools, we now see that our disk backup pool has 4 volumes in it, totaling 8 gigabytes, because you'll remember that it was 2 gigabytes per volume. So let's go and add some capacity to our archive disk pool as well. So we do the same thing. We highlight the disk library, click on label, choose the slots that we want to label. I'm going to do 4 more and leave 2 free. Choose the archive pool, hit the label button, let that run. It's completed, and now we have 8 volumes. Under pools we can see we have 4 volumes in each pool, and we have 8 files, container files in our disk library folder. So we now have storage all configured such that we could go run a backup or run an archive plan, and the archive plan or backup would start to write data to these volumes. So let's look in a little bit more detail at the volume list and just briefly discuss the different columns that you can see here. It's worth pointing out at this point that the column views within Archiware are resizable, so you can drag these columns around so you can see the information you want to see. You can swap the position of the columns around. Each of the column headings has a little drop-down menu against it, which allows you to choose the sort order, to choose the columns that you actually want to see. So if you weren't interested in seeing the clone column, for example, you could switch that one off and back on again. And you can also filter. So if I have a very long list of volumes in my workflow and I'm interested in just the backup to disk pool, then I could do a filter and type in the name of the pool that I'm interested in, backup disk, and then we just see those 4 volumes that match my filter, and then I can come in here and turn the filter off again to see all 8 volumes. So just going across the columns, the ID is Archiware's internal identification for this volume. So the volume label can be changed, but the ID will always remain the same. If you double click on a volume, you can change the name. So I could call this Monday Backup if I wanted to, and completely exclude the ID. Apply that, close, and then you'll see I've now changed the volume label to something that might be more meaningful to me in my backup workflow, whilst the ID stayed the same. The clone column is there to indicate if cloning is in use. Cloning is a feature that you can be set on the pool, which allows archive workflows to clone their data across two tapes. So you've got redundancy and the data exists on two separate tapes or volumes. The pool name is obviously the pool that this volume belongs to, and by default the volume label is set to be the pool name and then an incrementing number. The barcode doesn't really do anything when we're dealing with a disk library, but when you're using tapes, the barcode is captured from the sticker on the tape by the tape library and then recorded by Archiware, so that if we're provided with just the barcode for a volume, we can look that up and know which tape that is. The slot position and the location indicate the library, the disk library in this case, but could be a tape library, and the slot within that library. The mode of the volume, if we just double click again on this one, I can show you the mode menu, which shows some of the other options available. So by default, volumes always begin life as being appendable, which means that data can be appended and written to them up to the total size of the volume, and then the volume will become full, which means that it's no longer possible to write to this volume, and Archiware would ordinarily, if there's more data to be written, move on to the next volume in the pool. Other possible flags for the volume are read-only, so if you have a volume that you do not wish to have written anymore but perhaps isn't full, you can manually set a volume to read-only. And the recyclable mode means that this volume contains data which the backup plan has deemed is no longer necessary to be kept because we're only keeping data for some period of time. So under those circumstances, a volume will be set to be recyclable and then can be overwritten and reused by the system. The closed mode is simply used when you are requesting that full backups are not written to a tape containing incremental backups, so that the tape can be closed off and removed from the library. So let's set this one back to appendable and close that window. The date columns, which you'll see over to the right hand side, are applicable to backup workflows where tapes are automatically recycled, so we'll cover that in the backup module. Next, let's go back to our pools and just explore some of the additional options that were available in the pools that we didn't look at earlier. So far we just provided a name and a usage for the pools that we created. The drives section here does a couple of different things. If you have two tape drives in your tape library, for example, it's possible to associate a pool with a tape drive so that that pool will only use that tape drive. So that means that you could have one backup workflow assigned to one physical drive and then maybe keep the other drive assigned to an archive pool, so that you know that no matter what backups might be running, the archive pool always has its own drive available to it. So to do that, you would select the drive that you're interested in assigning to the pool in the drop down, hit the plus button to add it to the list, and then you can edit the list with the minus button. The clone data checkbox works as follows. It affects the way that the tape drives are used. So in order to use cloning, you need to have two tape drives available, either separately or maybe combined together in a tape library. So there's a tape library with a number of slots in it. So the way to think about cloning is you've got your storage that you're probably archiving from, because cloning is generally used with archiving. So you've got a load of files that we're reading from this storage, and we're making a data stream. We call a data stream. So we're basically reading this data, and what we do is we then we clone. So we write to both tape drives at the same time, and we do it in such a way that every file that appears over here on the storage gets written to both tapes. So the tapes are going to be identical. So the tapes basically become a pair, and they are written together, and when you want to restore, either one of those tapes can be used to restore from. So that means that once both tapes are full, you can leave one tape on site for restoring from, the other tape can be put somewhere safe, and if you do ever have a problem with the tape that you're restoring from, you can regenerate it by using the off-site one, bringing it back on site and effectively duplicating it. So cloning provides redundancy by writing to two tapes simultaneously and creating two identical tapes. So that's cloning, normally just used with Archive. The menu up here gives us a few different options to do with the way that tapes are mounted and unmounted when using standalone drives. One thing to point out here is that it's possible to set the media block size. This is not something we would do with this pool because it's a disk pool. Some tape drive vendors specify recommended block sizes for writing tapes, typically LTO 4, 5 and 6 tapes, and you can set the media block size via this drop down menu before any tapes have been labelled in the pool. So because the tapes have already been labelled into this pool, this media block size setting can't be changed. So if using LTO drives, it's recommended to, at the outset of the setting up this workflow, find out what the recommended block size is for the drive you're using and set that in here. The other options we may come back to in a more advanced video. And now to the parallelizing options. Parallelizing options allow you to fine-tune backup tasks and the way that they read from storage and use the tape drive resources available. And I'm going to draw you a few pictures just to illustrate how this works. So parallelizing options, which I'm not going to attempt to spell or say again. The way this works is that you've got your disks that you're reading from, and then you've got your tape drives that you're writing to. So it's similar to cloning, but it does a completely different job, and it's generally used with backup to speed up backups. So let's say that you've got 3 clients so that you're backing up, and each of those clients has a disk. So you've got client 1, client 2 has some storage to back up, client 3 has some storage to back up, and you've got 2 tape drives. Now the quickest way to back these up, all 3 of these machines up, would be to read from all of those machines at the same time and create a data stream in the middle where the data is being fed in on the left, and then in order to get that written to tape as quick as possible and thereby complete the backup as quick as possible, you'd want to use both drives, but you wouldn't want to write the same data to both drives. You'd basically want to use both drives and only put a given file that appears on the source on one of those tapes. So what we do is we write the data stream out to both drives, but we don't clone. We take whichever file is coming out of the data stream first and we put that onto the next available tape. So this file might go to this tape, and then the next file in the queue might go to the other tape. And this way we're able to increase the write speed potentially up to twice the speed that you would have been able to achieve if you were just using a single drive. And you can add as many drives pretty much as you want. The software will cope with that. So you can buy a really big library with lots of drives in it, and if you've got a huge amount of data over here to back up, then you can add drives on the right hand side to increase the throughput to tape. Now the parameters that allow parallelizing to be to be configured basically require that you've got an X and a Y, where X is the number of machines that you're going to read from at the same time. So in this instance there were 3, and then on the right hand side the other variable is how many drives do we use at once. Do we want to use 1, do we want to use 2, and so on up to the total number of drives that you have. In the middle you can actually elect to have more than one data stream. The default is to have one, so you would basically be creating a workflow with a single data stream in the middle, but it's possible to actually have the whole thing happen again and maybe have another 3 clients or 2 clients being backed up to a separate data stream to a separate pair of drives down here. And if you specify 2 data streams, then it would be possible to have the whole thing happening twice, but then it gets a bit complicated to think about. So I would recommend that you leave data streams, the middle option, set to 1, and then choose the number of machines you want to read from on the left and the number of tape drives that you want to write to on the right hand side. So let's go back and look at the interface. So back in the interface here, if I decided that I only want to read from 3 machines when I'm performing my backups, creating a single stream of data from those 3 clients that I'm reading from simultaneously, and because I have 2 tape drives in my hypothetical system, I would choose 2 drives per stream, and that would allow me to optimize the way that my backup runs by writing to 2 drives at once and reading from the 3 clients at the same time. Okay. So there ends the pools and volumes video. We've now configured pools and volumes. So please move on to the backup video, where we'll take everything that we've done up to this point and create a backup workflow, create a backup plan, and back up some data.